Hello and welcome back to my YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.10 ADC tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There are a lot of changes in the ADC role this patch. We have lost lethal tempo, obviously, that has hurt a huge amount of marksmen. PTA has been adjusted. A lot of marksman champions are now taking that as a default rune, alongside fleet. Halo Blades got nerfed for ranged champions, making it a bit less favourable within this space. On top of this, we saw buffs towards IE, Collector really coming out as a strong item. Quick blades, flicker blades, these are new options which the marksmen have. And yeah, let's cover the changes. So to begin with, the D-tier is going to consist of 3 champions. Smolder really took a big hit with Essence Reaver no longer being a Spellblade item. Same goes for Ezreal. Both these champions are in the D-tier at the moment. Smolder has been hit a lot harder. He's actually already been hotfix buffed, but is still massively underperforming and going to get buffed in 14.11. In Ezreal's case, people are starting to move over to the Trinity Manamune build. However, he is still very much underpowered. The build kind of pushes him closer to C tier as people do end up moving over, but yeah, the champion's underperforming a bit, so he belongs in the D tier. He's also relatively high skill, so he is not someone I would really recommend for mid elo. And in Zoe's case, the loss of lethal tempo has really hurt her. She also is now kind of defaulting on Bork. That tends to be her best first and slot item. And then you can go down the IE Runens kind of options, but she's still underperforming at the moment, so she sits within the D tier. Moving on to the C tier, we have Xayah. Xayah losing Navori Quick Blades has definitely took a bit of a hit. She now no longer also has access to lethal tempo. Both these changes did hurt her a significant amount. She's the closest champion to the D tier at the moment, but she's slightly better than the other options here, which is why she is in the C tier. Varus and Kalista have been underperforming because of pro play for a while within average solo queue. These champions didn't really get hugely adjusted by the changes this patch. Of course, both of them could opt into Halo Blades when they needed it. They do have other options, but yeah, they lost a bit of power, but Halo Blades tends to be a bit more default, and when you're going down the lethality tree, that tends to be what you opt into. They still underperform, they're still within the C tier. Aphelios, doing a lot better with a high elo at the moment, still not something I'd really recommend for mid and low elo. This champion tends to underperform quite heavily there. He is still a good option if you put the games in though. He tends to operate a bit better than some of the other options within the C tier. Kaiser is also going to be down here. She lost a bit of power with lethal tempo and the Halo Blades range nerf. The current build looks to be something along the lines of Kraken into Ginsu's, into either Nasha or Flicker Blades. However, some people have been IE rushing and finding success on this champion, so that might be an option to kind of look into. However, IE, of course, being nerfed in 14.11, might not be something you stick with for long. Yasuo is going the wrong build at the moment. He probably deserves a spot in the B tier, but as people are still very much building this champion incorrectly, the correct build and the bot lane role looks to be Phantom into IE for the most part. Yeah, people are still going Bork and Kraken. I'd recommend moving over. For this, I'm going to put him in the C tier. However, if you go the right build, he can definitely jump up into the B tier. Moving on to the B tier, we have Draven. Draven actually probably belongs in the C tier. Like, I could probably swap Draven and Yasuo around. Draven got hit pretty heavily with the nerfs in the 14.10b hotfix. However, the champion can still function quite nicely if you're very proficient at it. Of course, BT works really nicely as a first slot item. I'd recommend taking it over Collector. People are beginning to make that move over and then opting into things like IE. You can go Collector, of course, if you're snowballing, and then you have other options within your build path. He is still very much early game skewed. You're not really picking this champion to be strong mid and late game, and if you can kind of pilot that, he belongs in the B tier. If you're really struggling with Draven, I'd recommend avoiding the champion. He definitely does fall down the tier list if you can't pilot him particularly well. Senna, relatively unscathed with the changes in 14.10. She belongs in the B tier. Works quite nicely with fleet. You're still going either your Youmu's or your Opportunity. Tends to go hybrid crit to lethality. You can go primarily crit, of course, Collector, IE, both very nice items on Senna. But you can also go Opportunity. I'd recommend avoiding Umble Glaive, but yeah, there are other options there. Senna, solid B tier option. Sivir lost a bit of power with the removal of lethal tempo. Also lost power because of quick blades. She should now probably move over to something like a Kraken IE variation. However, Kraken does seem to underperform on a lot of the crit marksmen at the moment. Tends to be a bit better if you're not so reliant on that early 25% crit chance. She should be running fleet, but does look to be her best keystone by a bit at the moment, but she's definitely lost some power. She drops down from the A to the B tier. Vayne also lost a bit of power with the removal of Lethal Tempo. However, she was sometimes opting into PTA already. Fleet also works really nicely on this champion, so she stays relatively neutral. There's loads of build variations, whether you're going down on like an on-hit route with the likes of Bork, Ginsu's, stuff like that. You can also go a bit more crit heavy. However, the removal of Spellblade on Essence Reaver has hurt that. It's no longer as optimal, and yeah, the on-hit build still can work quite nicely if you are going down like the PTA route. She stays within the B tier for the moment. Tristana lost a bit of power with the removal of crit on Kraken Slayer. Of course, both her Q, well, technically her Q, of course, when you altering a lot with the ability, you really value the crit. Her E actually does have a crit chance scaler on it. When you build more crit chance, it amps the damage on the E by up to 33%, I believe. Losing the crit chance on the item early has definitely hurt her. Losing Navori Quick Blades has also hurt her. However, Flicker Blades can work quite nicely if you are looking at like a third item option. IE can work quite nicely on this champion. You can still opt into things like Fleet, you can go PTA. Halo Blades is no longer really that great of an option, of course, 110% down to 80% attack speed on that rune for ranged champions. But yeah, Tristana's still a solid B tier option, just not as good as she was in the patch before. Corki got hotfix buffed. It's put him about the B tier. I reckon this champion will climb as people learn him and optimize his builds. It looks like Trinity into IE tends to be standard, however, I know some people are experimenting with lethality builds, whether this is Hubris or Opportunity Rush, and then picking up things like a Manamune. There are builds being discovered for this champion at the moment. If you want to hold out and like see what people see what comes out as like the most refined build, then that is something you can do. But at the moment, it does look to be the lethality build, especially with I being nerfed next patch. That seems to be what a lot of people are preferring. But Corki, a solid B tier option, will probably rise going into next patch when people have a more refined idea of what they want to build on him. Lucian, still a very solid option. Of course, you are looking at either Essence Reaver or Collector on this patch. With the changes coming next patch, it will most likely be Essence Reaver into IE. But Champion's still a very solid spot. Most part, if you're snowballing Collector, if you're not really snowballing, then Essence Reaver is still a very solid option. And then, yeah, IE, LDR, stuff like this can work quite nice on this champion. A solid B tier option. Nyla lost a lot of power. Nyla being in the B tier doesn't make her a very favourable champion. If anything, I believe she is the least popular ADC in the game at the moment, out of like the core ADC roster. Yeah, the champion's unpopular. IE Collector tends to be what Collector IE tends to be what she is favouring at the moment. You can still function nicely on this champion, of course, if you're able to scale or you have good pairings. That tends to be where a lot of her value lies. However, she's definitely down a bit. She sits within the middle of the B tier. Cogmore lost Lethal Tempo, is now on PTA. Champion still builds relatively good items, and of course he was overpowered in the patch before in 14.9, so he has probably dropped from like S plus to like B tier, but he's still a solid option. High B tier, low A tier pick, tends to be a bit more low elo skewed. Yeah, still a solid champion. Veigar and Ziggs are the two AP options in this tier. Both of them are pretty solid at the moment. But Ziggs should probably be moving over to Blackfire Torch. Veigar seems to be preferring the likes of Roa and Seraphs at the moment. Gives them a bit more durability. Of course, Seraphs being Shreddy's being nerfed has definitely hurt Veigar. The champion doesn't seem to be as performant as on this patch as he was in the patch before, but he's still a solid AP scaling option. Ziggs definitely benefits from going Blackfire Torch. You should definitely be going this option if you are playing Ziggs in the ADC role. Moving on to the A tier, this is where the tier list gets really funky. So we've got Seraphine as the AP option in the A tier. She seems to also be operating quite nicely on Blackfire Torch. It definitely seems to be something you should go on this champion. However, Seraph's still a very solid option. You can go that item if you do want it, and then you have different build variations. The champion is doing a lot better with the Q AP ratio buffs, deserving of a solid A tier spot. Samira got hotfix nerfed. I believe she'll be pretty bad next patch when both the Collector and the IE nerfs come in 14.11, but for this patch she kind of sits at the bottom of the A tier. She's still doing fine. Of course, you want to be proficient of a champion. She's early game skewed, and if you can abuse this, then definitely strong within that space, but not quite S plus tier level. Towards the bottom of the A tier. MF operates quite nicely on both Collector and IE at the moment. You can still go the lethality option. Of course, that would be something like a Yomu's Collector, Schroeder's Trio, and picking up things like an Edge of Night. But you can kind of mix between crit and lethality at the moment. Both work quite nicely. MF, very simple champion to play. hovers within the A tier for the moment. Ashe, also a relatively simple champion to play, can still work quite nicely on the Kraken Trinity, the mixed pen item. Terminus is also a very solid trio of items on this champion. I believe she has moved over to PTA as being her rune choice. You can also, of course, opt into things like Fleet. Lethal Tempo gone, definitely hurt her. Kind of drops her from high A to like mid A, but she is still a very solid, easy to play champion. Good setup. If you're looking to pick Ashe for the reasons you were in the patch before, then you should still find relatively similar success. Twitch works quite nicely on, so Twitch in 14.9 got hit pretty hard with nerfs, but he's still fine this patch with the likes of Bork being a bit better, Runans being changed, IE being a bit better. These items work quite nicely on him. Honestly, Collector Rush on Twitch has looked pretty promising as well this patch. It seems to be doing quite well. Of course, that you tend to opt into Collector when you're snowballing, so that can elevate the win rate, but he's working quite nicely with these builds. PTA was always a solid rune choice on Twitch anyway, so yeah, solid A tier pick. Just not quite challenging the S tier, but very high A tier. Moving on to the S tier. So Hui and Swain are big winners of Blackfire Torch. Both these champions weren't really a huge fan of some of the old or some of the previous patches, lost chapter items. Swain was kind of tied to Malignance, but the item felt pretty bad to build on him. In Hui's case, he was kind of tied to Archangels and Ludens. Now that both of them can go Blackfire Torch and feel a bit better about their item choices, they are doing relatively well at the moment. Very solid S tier options. Hui has really good access to damage, is being nerfed next patch, so I'd really recommend playing him this patch. Swain, unpopular, but still a very solid option. Brand, also within this tier because of Blackfire Torch, he is doing very nicely on the item. Blackfire, Leandri, Riley, these items work really nicely on him, gives him a lot of slowing capability, gives him a lot of burn potential. It can be very hard to play against this champion if he's ever ahead of the curve. Great team fighter. Brand, very solid S tier option. Also will be better next patch with Nami being buffed, so keep your eyes out for that one. Caitlyn, one of the biggest winners this patch, was being, people going Lethal Tempo in 14.9 on Caitlyn were trolling. That rune was not good on her. She's never been good on, for the most part, she has not been good on attack speed builds for a very long time. You should have always been going mostly Fleet, Raw AD versions, or First Strike works quite nice on this champion, especially this patch. I would recommend going First Strike as primary keystone option, and then Fleet as a backup, but these two do work really well on the champion. And then something like a Collector IE build, and then you can kind of flex around whether you want RFC, LDR, BT, or whether you want a bit more lethality. You can kind of mix depending on what rune choice you are and what enemy team comp is. She is really benefiting from this from the new stuff this split. She's going to get adjusted next patch, and it should hurt her quite a bit. But for the most part, she's very strong at the moment. A very good S tier pick. She is banned a lot. She is the most popular champion in the game, I believe. Yeah. Caitlyn, very good S tier pick. Moving on to the S plus tier, these champions are also really strong at the moment. Karthus, the best AP champion in the game, honestly, this patch. He's being nerfed into 14.11, but yeah, with Blackfire Torch, the amount of accessible burn he has, combined with his very powerful ultimate, the tools, already being a relatively strong APC, great bot laner, has good pairings. Karthus, very good S plus tier pick at the moment. Jinx and Jhin are the other two marksmen here. So Jhin really benefiting from the items this patch, having more accessible crit earlier on, gives him a lot more movement speed. His damage is incredibly high. This champion can actually kill tanks this patch, which is something which he's always had a big problem with. Also, AD assassins are a bit on the weak side, so he's also benefiting from that. A great S plus option, also relatively easy to play, so yeah, very good champion at the moment. And Jinx, she's the premier marksman of the patch. Once again, was already very, very strong in 14.9, benefited from the changes this patch, IE being really strong, Collector being a very solid option on her. And then, yeah, you can go like crit variations, and she finds so much success. A great snowballing marksman, relatively simple to play, and yeah, the lead ADC for this patch. Those are my thoughts. The tier list looks really weird. It's very back heavy because of the amount of strong champions there are, which is very much pushing down a lot of choices at the moment. With some of the nerfs coming in the next patch, we should definitely see a lot more picks opened up. Of course, Warder being buffed, Jinx being nerfed, Caitlyn being adjusted, kind of nerfed down. Blackfire Torch, of course, is still going to be strong, so I imagine we will still see a lot of APCs being very strong at the moment. Weight is, of course, also being nerfed. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Bye guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.